Well, it's time now for our political panel, and joining us live from Perth, Labor MP Josh Wilson, and from Sydney, Liberal Senator Holly Hughes. Welcome to both of you. Obviously, there is no escaping the big story right around the world at the moment, which is the death of Queen Elizabeth II. So much of what we're seeing at the moment is steeped in deep history. But Josh Wilson, how much of it do you think is really resonating with the Australian public, considering that this is a very different Australia to when Queen Elizabeth first assumed the throne more than 70 years ago?
Hi Matt and hi Holly. Look, I think it is resonating with the Australian public, and that's because the service that Queen Elizabeth II gave was of such duration and dignity and dedication, and it's been a mainstay in people's lives one way or another for 70 years, all of my lifetime, all of the lifetime of many Australians. So there's no doubt that it's a momentous and historic occasion, and certainly I'm finding through my electorate office that a lot of people are reaching out and requesting portraits of Queen Elizabeth II and making their feelings known, and it's something that almost everybody you encounter wants to mention or reflect upon.
That's one of the novelties of being an MP, isn't it? That members of the public can actually write to you and ask for a copy of the portrait of Her Majesty.
That's right. That's right. That's one of the things that we do. I think sometimes people have slightly the wrong idea about exactly how that works. I do get some people sending me images of their passport and asking for 16 different kinds of national memorabilia, but it is part of what we do, and it's understandable that for some people at this point in time it's triggering that kind of response.
Holly Hughes, I'm sure you've also been hit with some of those requests, not only in the last couple of days or so, but over your time in Parliament. But I want to ask you the same question here about how you think the Queen's death is actually being received across Australia. The outpouring of grief that we're seeing, is it suitable? Is it part of modern Australia?
Look, I think it is, and I think, even though she was 96, there was a sense of immortality. No one really thought it was going to happen. She has been around, as Josh was saying, for most Australians' lives. And I think, in some sense, there was always that feeling that she would be there. She was that figure of stability, and the life that she led, so committed to service, was just an extraordinary life and contribution, and over such an extended period of time. I think a lot of Australians feel deeply upset at her loss and have a real affection for the monarchy and the impact that it has on our system of government and across the community.
Holly Hughes, there's been a comment from the Prime Minister today that this is not a time for partisanship, and he's actually paid tribute to Peter Dutton, for the opposition leader, for supporting the government and how it's marking the death of Queen Elizabeth. But do you understand that some Australians might be watching the fact that Parliament's been suspended for a period of time, that everything is sort of, well, not everything, but a lot of the machinery of government, certainly from the elected government, has sort of ground to a bit of a halt? Do you understand there could be some scepticism there about why that's necessary?
Look, absolutely. And I guess one of the problems was when the sitting week this week was suspended, the reason there was going to be such a lengthy delay before we returned to Parliament is because there was already planned 5 weeks in between sitting periods. So unfortunately, the Albanese government hasn't put a lot of sitting weeks in our calendar. If we had not replaced this week, we would have only had 3 sitting weeks left in the year, which quite frankly, when we're sitting here in September, is just not good enough. And this is not about us being suspended for mourning for the Queen. I think that's highly appropriate. Parliaments around the world have done that through the Commonwealth, certainly, and it's one of those things that should happen as we mourn the passing and respect to the Queen. But the fact that we did have an already pre-planned 5-week break before the budget, and I mean, we've now got this week. The Labor Party made a big deal about family-friendly hours, changing the culture of the place, not sitting through school holidays. My kids have now gone from one holiday to coming to Canberra because it's now happening on the first week of school holidays. But Prime Minister Albanese won't even be there for 2 of the 3 sitting days because he is away at the memorial for Shinzo Abe in Japan. So why this week was selected, it could have been in October, it could have been done at a different time, but it just seems to have all been very, very rushed through.
Josh Wilson, I can see you itching to respond to that claim from Holly Hughes there. Right of reply?
Oh, well, I guess, Holly can have her view. I think where you started, Matt, it's not probably the time for too much partisan back and forth. I mean, the reality is there's a difference between the House and the Senate. I think the House is sitting, had 5 more weeks to go, not the 3 that Holly was referring to.
You might want to check your calendar, Josh.
Very happy to check my calendar, Holly, thank you. But, we've hit the ground running. We've got climate legislation through the Parliament. We've introduced 10 days of family domestic violence leave, which is a big change. We're about to introduce an integrity commission that the previous government didn't see fit to do anything about for a considerable period of time. So I don't think the Australian public looking at the new government would question its application or its diligence or its competence. And at the moment, of course, just as Holly rightly observed, we're dealing with a very unusual historic occasion, the death of Queen Elizabeth II. Needless to say, no one in the Albanese Labor government has any control whatsoever over those kinds of events, and we're responding to them with the proper and decorous protocol that everyone would expect.
And it must also been pointed out the Coalition did cop quite a bit of criticism earlier in the year, back when it was the government before the election, about its scheduling of the sitting calendar. But I do want to pick up on one of the, consequences of Queen Elizabeth's death, and that is this discussion about whether or not Australia should become a republic. Josh Wilson, it is Labor's policy to pursue a republic, not in this term of government, but to pursue a republic. Do you think that her death is going to fuel that because of the affection that she had compared to that of her son?
Well, that's a view for all Australians to reach on their own terms. I mean, it's a conversation we've been having for some considerable time. I thought the item that you had before was very interesting, and the reflection on the fact that the last referendum we had was in 1999. I voted in favour of a republic at that referendum. But right now, what are we focused on? Well, quite properly, we're focused on marking the death of Queen Elizabeth II, paying our respect for her incredible service, and the government has before it the highest, most outstanding priority for our nation, which is the long neglected recognition of First Nations Australians in the constitution of this land. And that is no small thing. I mean, I would say to the people in the community, or all people in the community, but particularly younger Australians, you sometimes have the sense that the big positive historic changes have mostly been dealt with or have been taken on by other generations. This is the challenge that falls to our generation, and we have the opportunity to accept the invitation, the very gracious and generous invitation in the Uluru Statement from the Heart. We have the opportunity to accept that invitation and be part of making a long-awaited, momentous, positive shift in our nation's history, and that's what this government is focused on doing.
Holly Hughes, on the issue of a republic, do you think that this is the death of Queen Elizabeth will sway that debate at all?
Look, I personally don't. I think the behaviour of some people who have been trying to call for a republic over, well, particularly the first day when the Queen passed, their behaviour was quite appalling. I don't think Australians will resonate with those sort of comments that were made. The fact that the Australian Republican movement had a statement out calling for a republic half an hour before the Prime Minister spoke was extraordinary. I think it's incredibly disrespectful, and I don't think Australians will warm to that. It will come down to how King Charles performs as he takes over and as king, and I think what we've seen so far is he has moved into that role very smoothly. He has been training his whole life for it. He's the eldest person to ever become monarch at 75, so I think he will reign over us very, very well. And I think as long as that's the case, I think there's certainly a lot of affection in particular for the new Prince and Princess of Wales. I don't think you'll find a shift towards the Republic. I think also Australians are facing such significant cost of living pressures at the moment. They're not necessarily looking to how we change the way we're governed.
A glowing endorsement of Prince Charles, or King Charles rather, his performance 4 days into the job there, Holly Hughes. I want to take you to what Josh Wilson was mentioning there about the voice to Parliament, the Prime Minister saying that that is the priority. How is the coalition approaching this? I mean, we know that there are deep-seated concerns within coalition ranks about the need for this voice to Parliament, but at the same time, it is something that the Indigenous community broadly, not everyone, but broadly does seem to be calling for.
Well, Jacinta Price is in the Senate with me, and as an Indigenous woman from the Northern Territory, she certainly holds a different view. It's particularly interesting watching, if you'd like to say, white men mansplain to her why she should support the voice is quite a sight to behold. But I was actually supposed to get briefed in Canberra this week, not so much about the voice details, because I don't know there's anything that's been put out about those, but to discuss how it would work constitutionally if it was to be in the body of the Constitution. Remember, we've had 44 referendums in this country and only 8 have been successful. I think perhaps there's other ways that we could look at doing things that wouldn't require a referendum. Things like additional language in the preamble of the Constitution wouldn't require a referendum. So I think there is something that needs to be done with regards to recognition of Indigenous and First Nations people. We just need to make sure that we get the format right that all Australians are comfortable with, because we need a majority of Australians in a majority of states. It's not a simple majority that passes constitutional change.
Josh Wilson, it's a position that the Greens have been putting forward that it's hard to mourn the passing of the monarch when we still have a situation where Indigenous Australians aren't even in the Constitution. Just briefly on this, Marine Faruqi had tweeted about saying it was hard for her to mourn the loss of the Queen when there was the history of colonisation, and Pauline Hanson telling her, and I won't use Senator Hanson's exact words, but if you're not happy here, pack your bags and go back to Pakistan. Is that sort of language helpful in this debate?
Well, it's not. And look, people have to take responsibility for their own views. I guess we start from the position that it's a universal principle of our approach and our values that people have the right to free speech and that we have robust debate. But at the same time, that comes with responsibilities, and people should reflect on what they say and when they say it and the terms in which they make those comments. I guess as far as Senator Hanson, I mean, the way that these things then become an escalating tit for tat, I just make the observation that if the problem you have with the way that someone says something, whether you believe it's respectful enough, if your response to that is itself disrespectful and even abusive, I'm not sure that you're living up to the value that you're ostensibly trying to advance, and I don't know how you would be winning that argument.
Holly Hughes, would you agree with that sentiment?
No, not fundamentally. Look, the way Senator Hanson expressed herself may not have been the most eloquent, but I think her sentiment was very real and very genuine. I think a lot of us read that tweet that Marine Faruqi put out, the tweet that Adam Bant put out, and felt that it was incredibly disrespectful. I mean, just unbelievable that within hours of the Queen's passing, and mind you, this is a Queen both of these people have sworn allegiance to, in accepting their roles. It is under this Westminster system of government that they serve, yet they have said these outrageous things on Twitter. But, unfortunately, this is the way the Greens behave. They just seem to try and go for that base shock value as often as they can, and it's just disgusting.
Well, Holly Hughes and Josh Wilson, thank you for your insights as ever. We'll see you next time.
Thanks, Josh. Thanks, Matt.
Thank you.